Well, thanks for joining us today. And us, looks like Charlie and I today.
Yes.
So it's been a while.
It has been 3 weeks, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So it's good to have you back from a little bit of an R&R. Is that what you'd like to call it?
Yes, it has been. Rest and relaxation, or whatever those words are, and restoration. Judy and I were away,
Yeah,
good.
Good.
But we're glad to be back,
Good.
especially in the sunshine.
Yeah, no
We
kidding.
didn't get too much of that while we were away.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful week, and we are today going to be, for the most part, wrapping up First Peter. We might dibble and dabble in it a little bit next week, but for the most part, we're going to bring things to a close this week, and it's been really good. I have loved, as a small group, looking through this passage, and as a church also looking through this passage, and just to see how applicable the things are that we're reading in this passage, how applicable, even if we don't necessarily want them to be applicable, how applicable they are to life right now. It's been really good and challenging, and God is so good and faithful to teach us and to meet us where we're at, and we hope that that's, and expect that that's been your experience too. Last week, Ray and I were able to talk a little bit more and kind of bring to close some of the things that Peter says about the trials, the challenges, the struggles, the persecutions that we go through, and Ray talked quite a bit about what their purpose is and how we should specifically respond to them, and that God is looking to use the trials and the challenges in our life to grow our character, and to grow our relationship with Him, and also to display to people around us that God's grace, God's kindness, God's Spirit rests on us, and that He wants to extend that to the world around us. And we finished by talking about this whole idea of entrusting our lives to our faithful Creator, and that's the invitation that God gives us. And God gives us a similar, I would say, a very similar invitation in the passage that we're going to look at today.
And it almost seems like a summary of the whole book, as we were talking about it earlier, just this one
small phrase that we could read past quite easily, but it's really profound. And so we're going to spend most of the morning or most of this time kind of talking around that verse and the verses around it, but for you to get a good picture of the context of what we're looking at, you can, in your group, your family, or whoever you're with, if you're by yourself this morning, you can read 1 Peter chapter 5, the whole thing. I think it's about 13 or so verses. Take a look at it, hit pause, take a read. If there's initial thoughts or conversations that kind of things that stand out to you, then go ahead and chat about that as a group, and then come back and rejoin us here. All right. You had a chance to read, and we are ready to go. Charlie, you're going to lead off, and then we'll go from there.
I'm going to kick off because it starts, you will have noticed, with this exhortation to elders. And here we are, two of the elders from Vernon Christian Fellowship. And it just seems appropriate, obviously, to pick up on that a little bit. So in this, again, the first word of the chapter, therefore, it follows on from the previous chapter. It's the context of suffering still, and that you've already seen if you've read through the chapter, is picked up throughout this last chapter. But in the context of suffering and the glory yet to be revealed, Peter had something to say to the church leaders, to the elders. And so it seems appropriate to pick it up there. Therefore, context of suffering and this context of the glory to be revealed. And the way it's worded, I think almost involuntarily, I would think my natural thing would be to think about the eternal future, the age to come, the glory to be revealed in the coming age, where pain and suffering is all done away with, and we live in the presence, the brightness of God. But it is about the glory to be revealed today. As Landon was saying in the introduction, that we picked up on that last week with himself and Ray, but also earlier as we've gone through Peter, it's there over and again that that we are to be a display. We're to live our lives in such a way that people will say to us, can you explain the hope that you have?
Yeah.
We're to live in a way that displays the glory of God, that make people ask questions.
Yeah.
It's not just in the age to come, but it's for today, how we live our lives.
Yeah.
And that's the context that Peter wants to talk to the elders. So this phrase or sentence, elders, and then he says a few things about himself, but elders, shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight. And there are four things that I want to pick up on this from this passage, because obviously it's applicable to elders and the leadership of the fellowship, but it gives an understanding for us all for how the church, whatever's being said to the elders here, it has implications for the whole church. Mm-hmm. And it gives understanding it gives us some understanding. And I'm going to pull out a few things. Shepherd the flock. It's a verb. It's a doing word. And as I think about it, I'm sure all of the elders, as we talked and thought about it, we realize that there's this wide range of what is included in what needs to be done, the doingness of shepherding. But as a working sort of summary, let's just call it that it's about care for the well-being of the flock. There's lots more to be said about it. But we're not going to get into all of that. I'm just going to get into what follows immediately and is in that phrase, shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight. It's helpful for the elders who are doing it. It's also helpful for all of us, for those allotted to our care, to use a phrase later on, for the whole flock to understand what the elders are actually being called to, and the nuance, the context of what's being said in these words here.
Yeah.
So shepherd the flock of God, the church of God, the people of God. And first off, that makes me think, whoa, this is serious.
Right.
I'm involved in shepherding his flock that he hasn't just relinquished, but retains responsibility and care for. And so I need to be doing this with that in mind. It produces a holy reverence and awe. Mm-hmm.
But also a peace, because it's still his flock.
And there is that aspect as well.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. But it's this shepherding, caring for these folk who belong to God. So we need to shepherd, we need to care with respect and honor. But it also points in my heart to a direction that I need to exercise this care in such a way that the flock, if it's okay to use that word of us as a church, the flock are always on a trajectory towards understanding, a growing apprehension that I belong to God. Yes, these elders have a responsibility, but actually God retains and holds the responsibility of ownership and possession of me. And so as pastors, as shepherds, as elders, it's about moving us all on to be relating to God, where we can say individually, the Lord is my shepherd. Mm-hmm. And I know that resonates, I would think, with virtually all of the church, because we're familiar with Psalm 23, unless we're a brand new Christian and haven't got that. It's one of those passages that you just think, yes, the Lord is my shepherd. And that is part of what elders need to be moving.
Yeah.
As we shepherd, we need to be moving everyone on to a growing apprehension that God is my shepherd, and that's awesome. He cares for me.
Yeah.
And then this aspect of shepherd the flock of God, exercising oversight. Exercising oversight. I just find that an intriguing an interesting little phrase. What does it mean to exercise oversight? I don't think that's the sort of phrase that initially comes to mind when you think of shepherding, caring. That seems so much more pastoral to shepherd and care. I mean, and that's an oxymoron because it's talking about the same thing, but it's this, to be intimately involved with and there is this intimate involvement because oversight implies there's an inference of knowing. I'm looking out at the chairs that are empty here, but knowing things about each individual within the flock and understanding what's going on there. And so there is this personal aspect of shepherding, but in this oversight, there's also an aspect of actually, with distance and perspective, there's also an oversight. It's also an essential part of the oversight where immediate proximity is not a prerequisite to being a good shepherd or fulfilling the responsibilities of being a shepherd. It's about having that understanding of what's going on over there and here and there, and then responding accordingly. I just think if we look at the Good Shepherd, Jesus, and how he cared for people throughout the gospel accounts, it's extraordinary to think of some examples of how he cared for someone where I think we'd think, well, that doesn't seem immediately very caring. So it's challenging because, I mean, even as I'm saying all this, it sounds like, well, am I just trying to say we don't have to care in that sort of way? And that's really not what I'm saying at all. And it brings me to the last point I'm going to make, which ties it together with the sort of COVID time we're in. And this is a grammar lesson. I'm sorry, it's going to be a minimal grammar lesson because I don't even know what aorist or aorist or aorist or however you pronounce it means, but it's the tense of this word shepherd, the verb. The tense of the verb here, and it implies its meaning an ongoing freshness, ongoing vigor, not a routine undertaking, but there's a freshness, and it's brought out in the verses that follow about an eagerness and voluntarily and setting an example by where we're going. But it's this freshness that there's a fresh start, if you like, every day to pick this up. We need fresh invigoration from the Lord to pick this up. And I just think there's something about, ironically, there's something about the fresh starts, if you like, that we keep on getting through this COVID time with the new regulations and the additional regulations, and then the regulations being relinquished and then being brought back, that there's opportunity for fresh start over and over again. Here, Peter's talking about it for the elders, but I think it's true for each one of us, that in these changing times, as unsettling in one way that is, it's actually opportunity over and again to say, you know what? I need a fresh run at this. I need a fresh way of doing it. And actually, the elders, we're looking, over this last little while, we're looking again at how do we be involved? How can we be involved in the lives of folk that some we see on and off during these months and some we haven't seen for the duration of these months? How do we do this?
Yeah.
So please be praying for us. Yeah. We're excited about his mercies are new every day. And the challenge of being elders, the challenge of being caring of the flock, it's impossible without God.
Yeah.
And we need to tuck into God.
Yeah.
And we're trying the best we can. Do we do it perfectly? I think I can accurately and honestly say I've never had a perfect day in my life. The closest I ever came was when I admitted my imperfection and said, Lord, I need you to be my Lord. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
And that's how we need to be starting every single day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lando.
You saying that last bit makes me think about Brittany and I. We're always kind of blown away when we ask our kids for forgiveness when we've blown it. because they're always just like, yeah, I forgive you. And then like, play with Play-Doh. And they're like, totally off to the next thing. Like, it's no big deal. And yeah, as parents, we're growing, we're learning. And as elders, we're growing and learning. Yeah. And so. But the whole section here on elders, and even as we look at this passage, at first it can seem like it's like talking about all these different things, but really, Charlie and I were looking at it, it's just so hugely connected.
Yeah.
And it talks about us as church leaders and our role of shepherding. And then it starts talking about the great shepherd, Jesus himself. And then this idea of humility and how, as younger people in the church, how we should relate to those that are older than us and those that are elders in the church. And then he kind of jumps in and he says, actually, everyone should be clothed in humility, regardless of how old you are, regardless of your role in the church or in life. You should be clothed in humility. And it just continues to kind of morph into one thing after another. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about where he goes next and talking about humility. And when I think about humility, in the past I've thought, okay, humility is thinking really lowly of myself, like poor thoughts or
which is easy because you're kind of shorter than some.
Exactly, which is pointed out to me on almost a weekly basis. But humility is recognizing our, like just how you ended talking about eldership, it's recognizing our inability without Christ. And it's just what Jesus, his beautiful picture of the vine and the branches and how he says, apart from me, you can do nothing. And when we recognize that, we walk in humility where day by day in life and in its challenges and its good days and its bad days, we are gripped with this reality that we need Christ and we need his strength every day. And I think humility is often shown in a willingness to adjust and to let go and to change, a willingness to be instructed. And in this passage, he sets up for us is how pride and humility are eternal enemies, and how they really don't fit. And pride, actually, the wording is really strong. It God opposes the proud. Like, yikes! That's some strong words, that God would oppose someone, that he would stand against them.
And there's some opposition that really doesn't count.
Yeah.
There's some opposition you just think, we're going to beat this team.
Yeah.
Think of games and sport.
Yeah.
There's some opposition that you just think, bring it on.
Yeah.
But there's one opposition that it's like, it is huge. You're right.
Yeah.
If you just think about it, sports, opposition, so what? It's like, it just, but this is a game changer.
Yeah, totally. And so what the verse tells us, if we're humble, that God actually gives grace to us. And I mean, his grace is everything that we need for life and to live the way that he's called us to. And grace really is all founded on what he's done for us, where pride loves to point at self and say, I deserve this. And sometimes it's not even that we deserve good things, it's that we deserve to be upset.
Yes.
We deserve to be angry. We deserve to hold a grudge against them. We deserve to be frustrated.
Yeah.
And all those kind of things can just be a manifestation of pride within us. And yet humility looks and is willing to be adjusted. It's willing to change. And I think for me, humility in our relationship with God, it's challenging, but it makes sense because God is God. And so I should be willing to adjust. I should be willing to set aside my opinions. I should be willing to accept and receive his help because obviously I need it. That can make sense to me. But when that help comes through people, and sometimes people that maybe I find difficult, then yikes, that's where humility really gets tested in me. And that's why I think it fits even in the context of what he says about elders and what he's been saying about authorities in our life. is this whole reality that in order to really receive the blessings that God has for us, it's going to take humility.
Yeah.
To receive them, to receive correction, to receive instruction from maybe people that we don't fully agree with, or people that we have problems with.
Or just recognize imperfections in people.
Yeah.
I think of my kids, and I've referred to this, maybe not in this sermon series, but when we just had 3, we remember so clearly times of sending our oldest one out into the garden, into the backyard, to say, hey, boys, guys, it's time to come in for supper. And they wouldn't come because they didn't respect, not consciously, but they just didn't respect, they didn't receive. And so we changed the message to saying to Zoe, go out and tell them that Mummy says come in, or Daddy says come in. And then it was a different ball game. But that's one level of rejection. That's just, you're just like us. You're my sister. Why should I listen to you?
Yeah.
But when it comes to someone who's offended them in some way or another, then it can become really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And I think, our lives are riddled with that. I think every single child growing up deals with offense towards their parents at some time, and we learn how to deal with all of that, or we don't.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about. It really gets into the nitty-gritty of everyday life. This is it's huge, the impact and the necessity to, or the desirability, the benefits of receiving grace if we humble ourselves.
Yeah, and so humility keeps us in that place to continue to receive grace, and that's what we need. And so then the passage kind of goes another level of talking about how do we deal with the cares and the anxieties in our life. And I love this, how it says that we should cast them on God, and that's not just like a walking up cautiously and kind of like placing them before him and seeing what he does with them. It's the word is like a violent word, like not like we're mad at God, but that we're hurling, we're putting in effort to grab these things in our life that cause us anxiety, that are cares, that are worries for us, and we're throwing them onto God. And that obviously that takes humility, because I think one of the things that pride does is says, I can handle this, I can deal with this. And pride doesn't want to let go. Pride doesn't want to surrender. Pride doesn't want to ask for help. Humility is willing to come to one who we recognize as greater and more powerful than us, to ask for help. And so it's just this beautiful picture of coming, and that's what I've experienced. And it in certain areas of my life, it's gotten a lot easier. But initially, to bring cares that we have, legitimate cares in our life, to God, it can feel like a lot of work. Like it can feel almost like, I would use the word painful, and not like a physical pain, but a mental like exertion of like dealing with this, bringing it to God, casting it on him, and making these things in our life known to him, beginning these conversations with him where we're actually asking him for help. We're wanting to hear what he has to say about this stuff. And at first it feels like almost like death.
There's a work involved with it. When I think of casting, I find it illuminating to think of like casting fishing.
Mm-hmm.
I used to hate fishing. Growing up as a kid, I hated it because I never caught anything. But then I started to learn fly fishing, where casting to control the line and to get it, to cast it to land in that spot of the river. This is back in England, but going for wild trout in a river where you're looking, there's a trout there. It's not moving around, it's in station. And you've got to learn how to cast and get the fly right there, or to get it there to drift over. And there's this accuracy that, if I just can't, no wonder I didn't catch any fish, because I wasn't casting and it's like this. We can cast aside our anxieties with zero effect.
Right.
But it's learning the effort and the accuracy of casting them onto the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
exactly.
work.
It is work. But what this passage tells us, and I think what is the motivator and what is the foundation of being able to even do this, because with what right do we have to throw something onto
Hey,
God?
have my cares. And you'd say, I've got enough of my own.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully not.
Well, yes,
Yeah,
we
I
share
like
our
you.
burdens, but if I just kept on heaping onto
Yeah.
you, if everyone,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
but God.
But
yes.
God, he obviously is God, and he has the ability to deal with it. But not only the ability, but this passage tells us that he has the care to deal with it. And he's, like it says earlier, he's our chief shepherd. He's the best shepherd. He's the ultimate shepherd. And that shepherding looks like care. And at first, like, it was, as Charlie and I were bringing what we had prepared about this to each other and sharing it, it was almost like this little verse in here was we could skip past it and talk about the other things. But as we really talked about the passage, it was actually this simple words that he cares for you, he cares for us, is really extremely profound. And I think it's profound because for me it takes the reality of hey, God is great, God is good, God is powerful, God is faithful. It takes all of that and then translate it to actually God is faithful to me. God is great to me. God is good to me. All those things. And it actually makes it towards me, because otherwise God can be all of those things, but
God
not
can
be those.
Caring and all this stuff, but
to
so
care for us.
What? Does he care for me?
Yeah. And we were thinking about that in terms of people. There's some great people out there, but until they care for us, who they are doesn't actually affect us. No. It's their care for us that then takes who they are, and then it becomes a benefit to us. We get to experience who they are because they care for us. In the simplest way, it's like taking a car to a mechanic. You kind of think, well, he could do a good job or he might not, but please, will he care? And you know the job's going to get done, but will he have done it in a caring way where he might have noticed something else and brings it to your attention, or he might notice something else and think, oh, I'm going to not say anything about that because then I'll get him back again for more money. But it's to care. Yeah. It's huge. It makes such a difference. And we come across it in so many parts of life. Yeah. We might not use that word, but that's what we're thinking. We appreciate it. Changes everything when we're dealing with someone who cares for you. Yeah, totally. And I think this whole idea of God being a God who cares fits in with what Jesus said about children, where he said, let the little children come to me. I think the reason why the little children wanted to come to Jesus is because they noticed that he cared. And it's interesting watching my kids with certain people, how they just like instantly want to be around that person that's in our life, that comes into our house or that they meet. And there's other people that they're not that interested in, and that's not to like offend those people, but it's the people that show care for my kids. Like my kids instantly want to be around those people, and they're playing with them and they're dragging them into their games and all sorts of stuff because they notice that there's a care there. And children, I think, noticed that about Jesus, and so they wanted to come to him. And I think that's part of the reason why Jesus says that we should be like little children. And life has the unfortunate effect of often bringing us, as we grow up in this world and as we get affected by it, damaged by it, and different things, we start to doubt the fact that God cares for us. Yeah. And we see that a lot. And I think as this passage even progresses even further, it starts talking about this adversary that we have. He's an accuser. Yeah, and it's like, it really is, I think, how we were talking about it earlier, where I'd gone through my notes and I said a little bit about this caring. You went through your notes and you said a little bit, and then it's like, hang on, there's something big here that we're missing. Yeah. And part of the reason why is because there's this deep bass note that is resounding and growling through the world that just could cause us to ignore this
little verse about
Yeah.
God cares. Because what is this sound I hear? This
Yeah.
roaring, growling,
Yeah,
the
totally.
adversary.
Yeah, because it gets into talking about the devil and exactly how he's out there and he's roaring. And if I think if we were not careful, we would focus on that roar this message, and
It's why we turn off the air conditioning, because sometimes you will have noticed halfway through the message the air conditioning comes on and some of you are like, what's that noise?
Yeah.
And you start fiddling with your volume and your controls because you think, is there something, because there's this noise
and
that
it's
totally
there.
gets you to forget everything else.
Yeah, exactly. And we could really focus on the devil and how he prowls around looking to devour. But I think his roar and his desire to intimidate and strike fear into us is what this passage is talking about. And it just really gets silenced by the fact that we have a God who cares for us.
Yeah.
We have a shepherd.
Yeah.
And the whole picture of John 10 is, hey guys, like there's a sheepfold. There's room for you in it. Come and live in it. Like I'll take care of you. The enemy, he's out there. He's roaring and he's seeking to devour people. But I'm the good shepherd, and I won't let him in here. Like I'll guard you. I'll keep you. I'll protect you. I have good pasture for you. And we have that shepherd. We have Jesus, who has incredible care for us, and especially in the world right now. And maybe you can talk about this a little bit, Charlie, but there's a lot of roaring going on, and if we're not careful, we become quite fearful quite easily, and we forget that, oh, wait a minute, I have a God who cares for me and invites me just to come to him and to throw these worries on him and to receive just his love and his care, his commitment to me.
I'll say something there. I've lived in Zimbabwe, Africa. Lions are there. And I've camped out in the bush and I've heard lions roaring. Not often, but I've heard it. And two things to say. One is, like I sort of described earlier, you hear this deep noise and you have zero idea of where it's coming from. The nature of the bass notes that are there, you don't know how far away it is, you don't know what direction it is. I mean, you really do not. Ask anyone who's heard, unless they're actually seeing, because it's daylight. But at night, you don't know whether it's just over there or whether it's 5 miles away, the other side of the river. And the other thing about it is, if a lion's roaring, he's not hunting. He's not got you in his sights. If he's got you in his sights and wanting to, hey, this is a tasty meal, he's not going to make a sound. And we've seen it on TV, the various nature shows. Then they're just the slow creeping up silently. If you hear the roaring, it's because there's something really quite ineffective in terms of prey and hunter sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's fake. But there's so much roaring going on. I guess there always is, but at this time, in this, 2020, there just seems to be some very, very obvious places that are sources for this deep roaring of the enemy that would look to intimidate and bring fear and look to just bind us up and to bring us to a place of forgetting about the fact that God cares for us.
Yeah.
And he's powerful to care.
Yeah.
And if we jump down to the end of the chapter, he's going to, what is it, those things? You'll find them there somewhere. I've got them here, but,
he himself will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you.
Yeah, he's going to do these things. He's going to work it out. But there's plenty of roaring. There's a part of me that doesn't want to mention, it's all linked in with COVID, linked in with the various aspects of the restrictions, linked in with responses that are not essentially humble.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room for different responses. And there's a way of responding this way in humility, and there's a way of responding that way in humility. It's the same with all that's going on around the US elections, that it's not Canada, but it affects us in a variety of different ways. There's a way of handling it with humility and life. There's a way of handling it proudly. I think essentially it is pride.
Yeah.
Bottom line, it's pride.
Yeah.
My sense is we've got a lot more to talk about, and I suspect there's things that you might want to talk about in light of what we've said, and time is pressing on. We're going to pick up on some of these things next week.
Yeah.
We're going to sort of have a concluding time around Peter and around what's going on, why we were looking at the book of Peter for these last few months.
Yeah, and I would just throw in one last thing here, how it ends, where it says he himself will restore and strengthen and establish you. That happens through us casting our cares upon him because he cares for us. Yeah. It happens through coming to God humbly with where we're at, how we're doing, what's on our heart, what's on our mind, bringing it to him and allowing his care to affect our lives. And just want to end with this like little thought of, and I'm sure lots of us parents have experienced this. I experienced this when I was a kid, but I'm experiencing it now as a father. When my children wake up in the night with a bad dream. And this happened this past week to Ella, and she came screaming down the hallway and woke us up. And all I have to do as a father is pick up my pillow, walk down the hall, grab a blanket, and sleep on her floor in her room with her and Josie, and there's peace. And that fear that was there from that dream is totally gone because Dad is there. And there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. And I feel like that's pretty humbling for me because I'm just a person. I'm just Dad. And if that's how my kids feel about me, how much more should we feel that about the presence of our Father and his care for us? Yeah. So that whatever is causing us terror or frightening us or causing us anxiety, let's run down the hall. Even if it looks obnoxious sometimes, let's run down the hall. Let's run to our Father and draw near to him as he draws near to us and enjoy the peace that comes from his presence in our life. And it will be a game changer. You will sleep differently. You will rest differently. You will go about your day differently out of the knowledge that he's with you and he cares for you. And there's nothing in this world that can separate you from his love. Yeah. So hope you're encouraged. Yeah. And
I want to say the very first, or one of the times, the same scenario, I can remember that. But I can remember saying to whichever one of the children it was when we first did this, of saying, look, you've got to go back to bed. And they were very worried about, they didn't, but it was like, but I'm coming with you. Yeah. And it's like this book. Yeah. Peter is saying, you're not going to be taken out of the world. You're going to suffer in it. It's going to be, but God is with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you pray for us?
Yeah. Father, thanks that you are with us, and it's actually your promise that you will never leave us nor forsake us. And there's lots going on in our lives right now, and there's lots going on in the world around us, but I believe you want to settle us today in your love and your care for us. And so I just pray that would happen as we listen, as we hear your word to us, just the simple words that you care for us. And so we can come to you with what's going on in our lives right now. We can throw those things upon you. And thank you. That is an honor. That's such a joy to be able to do that. And we want to be doing that as the church family and just enjoying the benefit of that and still being very involved in this world, very present in this world and in our neighborhoods, but in a freed kind of way to really love those around us. Yeah, thank you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Great. See you next week.
See you next week.
Yeah, you bet.
Bye.